the rematch between Alex Poatan Pereira and Yuri BJP Prochazka is going down this Saturday at UFC 303 in Las Vegas. I'm going to be giving my breakdown of every single fight in the card, giving a detailed analysis, and at the end, a pick for every single one of the fights. Starting with the first fight of the night, which is Ricky Simón versus Vinicius Oliveira. I think that this is a bit of a mismatch and a bit confusing, why they want to give Vinicius Oliveira this big of a step up in competition this quickly. Looking at the resume of Ricky Simón, which is extremely solid. I know he's coming off of 2 consecutive losses, but it's to Mario Bautista and to Song Yadong, which, was, before that, he's on a 4-fight win streak with, Gaetano Pirello, don't know them, but Brian Kelleher, Rafael Sunsao, and Jack Shore. Those are 3 impressive wins in a row, and, I know that we don't have the biggest sample size to go off of with Vinicius Oliveira. What we do have is a sick flying knee knockout of Bernardo Sopaj, which seems to be the lasting memory in everyone's minds. And naturally so, right? When you have a sick finish with 19 seconds left in the fight, that's going to leave a lasting impression on people. But, Sopaj was not only winning early in that fight, but with the wrestling. And, we all know Ricky Simón's game plan at this point. I don't want to say that he doesn't have finishing upside, because he definitely does, but he's not going to connect with one big shot and end the fight. If it were a TKO, it would more than likely be an accumulation of strikes, being on top with the ground and pound, or if it's a submission, I think that it would be, like an arm triangle or like a rear naked choke, maybe in the second, third round. But I'm going with Ricky Simón here. Fighters do get to a certain point where I wonder if they are going to start declining, but he's 31 years old. And he's fighting out of a great camp, American Top Team Portland. I would honestly be very, very surprised if Vinicius Oliveira gets this dub. Could he? Yes. But, I just think that the guys that we've seen beat Ricky Simón were battle-tested, very, very impressive bantamweights. And maybe Vinicius Oliveira is that. And, sometimes even when someone hasn't exactly shown what I need to see, but the promise is so there, is so strongly in their favor that I'm willing to roll the dice on them. But in this case, I think this is a massive step up in competition. I really think that there's other fighters that they could have given. I mean, obviously the promotion thinks very highly of Vinicius Oliveira. But, I worry that maybe a defeat like this could, really derail the hype train. Whereas if they gave him, a couple more, like they had him previously booked. Okay, that was actually before the Sopaj fight. Anyway, this is just a huge step up in competition. I mean, Ricky Simón is, he's a ranked bantamweight. And I think that many people, who analyze MMA consider bantamweight to be either the top or second deepest division in the UFC. To the lightweight division being the other one. But so, I'm going to go with Ricky Simón here. All reliable, more than likely by decision. Finish is on the table. I would not bank on him winning by decision, but I think that a Ricky Simón win here is likely. So moving on in the card to the second fight, we have Carlos Hernandez versus Ray Suruya. I think I'm saying it correctly. Look, I know that Hernandez is a 310 underdog here. And, you have an undefeated prospect who is 22 years old, and it's like, from what we've seen recently, let's just, looking at every piece of this here, I have not seen a fighter come off of a road to the UFC tournament win and be extremely successful in the UFC. So that's one red flag. Another red flag is that he's only 22 years old. I understand that being a younger fighter in some regards has its advantages. However, I just think that ideal range to be fighting guys like Carlos Hernandez is, maybe even like 4 years down the line, closer to 26. He's a little bit shorter than Carlos Hernandez, 1 inch reach advantage. In his last fight, which was the finale of the road to the UFC, it's like, yeah, he looks amazing, almost getting a twister into a ground and pound. By the way, very early stoppage, I thought, was probably going to win either way, but, early stoppage. And it's like, I've seen Carlos Hernandez handily beat Dennis Bondar, who I understand is having, a rough go of things, having lost his last 3 fights in a row. But, Bondar is a fighter who I've seen, do well. And it's like, so he's lost to Alan Nascimento, who is fighting out of Shoot a Box. Obviously, you guys are familiar with Shoot a Box. If you're an avid UFC fan, if you're not, that's, gym that famously Charles Oliveira trains out of. And they are known for having crazy hard sparring sessions and being extremely battle tested. And there's a lot of guys out of that camp doing very well in the UFC right now. And so it's like, he did get finished in both of those losses, but, I've seen this guy beat in the UFC Victor Altamirano and Dennis Bondar. And he had a canceled bout against Cody Durden. Like, these are the types of guys in the flyweight division who, like, are they beatable? Yes. And when I see a prospect like Tatsuro Taira, leading into his fight with Carlos Hernandez, at that point, we had already seen Tatsuro Taira handily defeat CJ Vergara, Jesus Aguilar, Edgar Chairez. Like, I haven't seen enough from Saruria. And again, it's just like, I don't generally like to see somebody on the... I understand that, like, it's early in the prelims, and it's not like every single person is going to be there, but, like, this is a big stage. UFC 303, formerly McGregor card, now has a Pereira and Yuri, main event. A lot of eyes are going to be on there. This is a huge step up in competition as opposed to, the guys that he's been fighting. And it's like, let's look at the guys that he's been fighting. These guys are in promotions that we can't, and Jin Yu Shiu, right? The guy that he beats in the Road to UFC finals. Like, does he beat him in a very impressive manner? Yes. But, like, that guy is ranked, as far as Tapology is concerned, as the 90th best flyweight fighter. And, the step up in competition that he is having, and I know that these things, it's not everything that you're going to, rely upon, but, like, now you're jumping up to the guys in the 30th best. Like, this is a huge step up in competition. From what I saw from his opponent, I could see Carlos Hernandez probably finishing, the guy that Ray Saruria finished. So, I know that I'm going out on a little bit of a limb here, and I might look silly, and I looked pretty silly on a handful of the picks last weekend, if I'm being honest. UFC Saudi Arabia was a very interesting card, but I am going to be going with Carlos Hernandez as a big underdog. And I think that he wins a decision here. I think that Saruria is going to really try to implement his ground game, and he might have some success, but I think that ultimately, if Hernandez lands a few good shots, we could be looking at a situation where this is one of the first times he's actually been hit with big shots, and he's in a, effectively, right? Like, I know we got to see him fight, but like, this is his UFC debut. And there's just too many red flags. And, for that reason, I'm going to go on a flyer here. Carlos Hernandez, by decision. All right, so moving on the card. In the third fight, we have Andrei Arlovski versus Martin Buday. It's very interesting how in the heavyweight division, you have a guy who's 45 years old in Andrei Arlovski. 45 years old. You wouldn't even see a 45-year-old fighting in the middleweight division or light. Like, this is the only division. And it's just, like, I don't think that this is the Andrei Arlovski that we saw go on a 4-fight win streak against fighters where the wins, like, don't age well at all. Like, even though he was on a 4-fight win streak at that time, it's like they aged so poorly, and like some of them he lost. I'm quite sure he lost that split decision to Jake Collier. I mean, I guess you can go with him in the Vandera fight, but like, look at who we're talking about here. And then at least he made it to decision with Waldo Cortez Acosta, although Waldo Cortez Acosta is seeming to become almost like a Jailton Almeida, dare I say, where he's just willing to just win. He's not trying to get the finish. You got two guys who don't finish a lot of opponents in Marcos Rogerio de Lima, at least, within the UFC. You can't really say that about, sometimes these guys are knocking people dead on the regional scene, but I can't pick a 45-year-old, I just can't. I think that the UFC is really struggling at this point to keep like a really competitive top 15 in the heavyweight division. Like, the heavyweight division at this point, flyweight is probably more impressive than heavyweight. I mean, if you're looking at just the quality of the overall division, the fact that he is fighting in this fight just sort of speaks to that. But, let's talk about Martin Buday. You see a fighter who's on a massive win streak, eventually losing to Shamil Gaziev. And, like, not only does he lose, right, but he gets finished. And I understand that sometimes you look at things and it's like a cascade effect of things happening that just do not age well. Like, you see him knock out Martin Buday, and then you see him get knocked out by Biggie Boy, Jairzinho Rozenstruik. But I think what we really need to understand here is that the UFC heavyweight division, like, the levels, once you're at, like, the top 5, the top 10, the top 15, the top 30, like, the delta is way further than what we're seeing in other divisions, which is why in other divisions we are seeing instances where somebody gets a massive step up in competition and they make it look more competitive than it really should be from time to time, whereas in heavyweight, it's like a lot of times when we are seeing these step ups in competition, like Buday fighting, Shamil, and then Shamil subsequently fighting, Jairzinho. But, like, Martin Buday doesn't have to be that good to beat Andrei Arlovski. The only way that Andrei Arlovski is going to be able to win at this point is if he's able to kind of do his, like, I'm going to accumulate volume, pitter-patter, tit-for-tat, sparring match style of fighting. And something that I really like to see out of Martin Buday is I really like to see that he's getting in there with that champ camp with Tom Aspinall. And I just think that, like, I'm saying all this and I'm giving all this analysis about the fight, but at the end of the day, I really could just leave it at Andrei Arlovski is 45. And at 45, I just don't see how you're going to be able to, like, a lot of what Arlovski's, when he had his little resurgence run, it was about out-hustling. And it's like, how are you going to out-hustle Martin Bidet, who's 32? And, outside of his loss, like, he's not going split with Jake Collier. He's, quickly finishing Josh Parisian. And, I just think that what he has done has been very impressive. And maybe 10 years ago, Andre would have beaten him. And maybe even like less time than that, but not now. So I'm going to confidently go with Martin Bidet. But the one thing I'll say about Arlovski is that although we have seen him finished by, the likes of Don'Tale Mayes and Rogerio de Lima, I do think in this case, especially when you see a Bidet coming off of a KO loss, is that he's really just going to try to get the win here. I see a lot of holding Arlovski against the cage. I see a lot of clinch work. And I see him just more or less, clinching and, just hustling his way to a victory over a guy who has the same strategy but is not going to be able to implement it because he's 45. So give me Martin Bidet to win by decision. So moving on to the next fight on the card, we have Michelle Waterson. Let me get back here. Michelle Waterson Gomez versus Jillian Robertson. And this is a tricky one, And the biggest reason why it's a tricky one is the same thing as the Arlovski fight, man. Waterson Gomez is 38 years old. And I understand that, and it's a hard thing when you're picking fights like this, because what I'm relying on is that Waterson Gomez is going to be able to do the thing that, she was really able to do and to do quite well in her prime, which was to negate the wrestling and use the karate to keep people at a distance and just sort of just like light touches, but an accumulation of volume and win a decision that way. And maybe implement her own wrestling against somebody where, she held the superior grappling pedigree. So a fighter who's adaptable, but, and that's where it gets tricky, because against a specialist, and I do understand that Jillian Robertson is a specialist when it gets to the ground. So that's what makes this very tricky, is I could see Waterson Gomez having the takedown defense to keep this on the feet, and Jillian Robertson get very tired trying to take her down, and Waterson Gomez ultimately getting, a decision victory, because let's be honest, I don't see her finishing this fight, but I could see Jillian Robertson. I mean, I know that Waterson Gomez was very durable during her best years, but we have seen her get finished as of late. We have seen her, when she's taking damage, not necessarily looking like she's going to turn it around, which sometimes is a decision in these judges' minds when it seems like it's an early stoppage. If the body language suggests that she's, out, maybe Jillian could get a TKO. We all know how dangerous, her armbar is. And so will I go with Jillian being able, it just comes down to, is she going to be able to get her to the ground? Because I've never seen Jillian Robertson implement a striking offense that is going to do enough damage, even at 38. I think that, because my theory is that I think as fighters age, right, the thing that they were always good at should still shine, as long as it's not just being dependent on their chin. But with something like grappling, especially something that's really going to drain your gas tank as you're getting older and your gas tank is becoming, less and less, I could see Jillian wearing on her, even if just in the clinch, and eventually capitalizing maybe like a little foot sweep or a body lock, just kind of drag her down. But it's tough, Waterson Gomez has definitely fought the much better level of competition than Jillian Robertson. And, let's talk about it. I mean, looking at Jillian Robertson's, in recent, she did lose to J.J. Aldrich. I will say that people can get better, and that was years ago. And other than that, outside of grappling matches, she's lost to Miranda Maverick and Tabitha Ricci. And it's like, I believe at this point that Tabitha Ricci would be able to beat Waterson Gomez. And I could even see her being able to, implement the the wrestling game, because like that, her strong suit is being able to, implement her takedowns. Whereas again, I think Jillian Robertson can shine when either she's taken down or, she just finds a way to get it. But it's like, it's hard. You can't really rely on her just finding a way. I focus on who Jillian Robertson has been losing to, but if we're looking at who she's been beating, Maria Agapova doesn't age well. Pereira Rodriguez doesn't age well. Polyana Viana I have changed my mind throughout this video. I'm going with Michelle Waterson Gomez. I don't think I can rely on Jillian Robertson to be able to get takedowns. And I think that when so much of your game relies on something that I've seen Waterson Gomez do, girls don't take as much damage as the guys. And, I think that the UFC are probably giving her this match because they think that this is a winnable match, because they want her. They're working on deals, with Venom and her as a model. And I think she's going to win this fight. So give me Michelle Waterson Gomez to win by decision. Okay. I didn't think I was going to get there, but we're going to go with the Son of Water to defeat the son of Robert. Moving on, we have what I would like to refer to as the MMA human sacrifice in Peyton Talbot versus Giannis Gamori. There isn't much to say about this, other than every now and then the UFC decides, hold on, wait a minute, we have something here. So instead of continuing the upward trajectory, we're going to let this grow. We're going to let this marinade, and we're going to let it develop, because we want to see this all the way through. I think that they're going to sort of O'Malley his path. And I say all this because, how do you go from Cameron Simon to Giannis Gamori? One of two things happened, right? Either it became really hard to get people to sign the dotted line against Peyton Talbot, so they had to go down, or what I was saying originally. And I think that it's more than likely what I was saying originally. This guy has shown a vulnerability. We see him doing backflips out of single legs, which is crazy. His athleticism is insane. Truly a unique talent. I'm not going to lie. I was kind of feeling like Simon was going to get it done. And what he did to Simon was brutal. He looked so focused and composed in there. He was catching kicks and catching a kick and returning it with a head kick, chucking a knee, perfect timing. And he's just got an interesting aura about him. And for some reason, they just decided that Giannis Gamori is going to just get absolutely massacred. And again, good on Giannis having the balls to try to derail the hype train. But like, you don't often see somebody climb to a minus 2,000 favorite. So just, pour a little out of the 40 and say a prayer for our guy Giannis. I hope it's not too brutal. I do actually think that because I think Peyton kind of likes to make you suffer, which is crazy. Like, there's times where I felt like he could get someone out of there, and like, you could call it just trying to be like a veteran and staying focused and not like blowing your gas tank. But I kind of think he just like is, and I mean, he's got this like sort of aesthetic, right? Like the dog. And, don't be fooled by the fact that this man paints his nails and is like a, like a skater dude. Got some of the cleanest striking that I've seen. And I have to imagine that he was able to assess his deficiencies. So, dude, if Giannis Gamori just looks like Giannis Gamoromedov and is able to, implement a wrestling match or implement a wrestling strategy that is actually able to stifle Peyton Talbot, it will be the most impressive thing that anyone has done in the history of the UFC. So, Peyton Talbot by late second round knockout. When all of us just feel like, please stop this fight. I don't want to see this anymore. One of those fights where you feel genuinely uncomfortable, like watching Justin Gaethje beat the life out of Tony Ferguson. Moving on, we have Charles Air Jourdain, a fellow Charles, versus Gene Silva. And like, I'm going to be real with y'all, I don't understand all the hype on Gene Silva. I mean, it just feels like people are so willing to witness a really impressive performance on the Contender Series, and I understand it's like he's barking in the middle of his Contender Series fight, like he just looks like a maniac. He's clearly got that dog in him. I'm not doubting that, but and I know that like in a shocking turn of events, right, Weston Wilson gets a dub in his last fight, and so it like kind of makes that win, that stoppage win from Gene Silva, age well. But look, anybody who watched that Jekka Saragai fight knows that Jekka literally didn't know what a triangle choke was going into that fight. He had never grappled, ever. And he walked into the triangle choke and he reacted how the trial class guy reacts at the first day of training when you're trying to put a triangle choke in and they're like trying to get up and they're just like putting themselves deeper in the choke. So, I don't really rate, I know that West, like I was just saying, it looks good in hindsight, but to me, it's like I can sort of see through that. And like, don't get me wrong. I mean, Gene Silva has looked good. I mean, when you see him walking through, barking at his opponent, and, when you see the streak that he's on, I mean, he is on a 9-fight win streak. He's got to be coming in there with a lot of confidence. But, like, am I just supposed to pretend like Charles Jourdain, right, hasn't been competitive with some of the best guys in the featherweight division? You know what I'm saying? Like, I understand that he's had his losses, but let's talk about those losses, right? So in the fight with Shane Burgos, I mean, he just woke up late in that fight. He slept through his alarm, and he let the first and second round get away from him and put an insane beating on Shane Burgos. I thought that it was going to be a majority draw, 10-8 round, because Burgos was almost out of there. And, he loses to Nathaniel Wood, but it's like, again, I think Nathaniel Wood is a really good fighter. And Sean Woodson is just like this crazy, lanky guy that I can't imagine how these featherweights are going to deal with him. I mean, because he's showing that he can defend against the wrestling. Like, Jourdain was trying to mix it up. He was kind of headhunting a little bit, but like you could tell he's like, okay, the striking isn't working. I'm going to try to grapple. And he was trying to mix it up, and it just wasn't working because Sean Woodson is a freak and a really good fighter, and he's on a really big win streak. And I know that probably should have just been a unanimous decision loss, but again, I don't understand. Like, I could be wrong, right? And I'm not saying that this is a lock, because Jean has looked good, but I just, like, this is another example of when, there's a big step up in competition that I just don't feel like one is even warranted. Like, why not have Jean Silva? Like, let me look at the featherweight rankings. He's fighting a guy now who's in the 30s, with Charles Jourdain. Like, why not have him fight Julio Arce or Cheyenne Nurdenbekov or perhaps even like Shepe Mars. I mean, he's been on a couple wins in a row, so he's probably heading on the up and up. Maybe someone who's lost. Kolibao. I just feel like, I don't know. I just feel like this is a big step up in competition. And I just feel like if Jean Silva's strategy is just to walk you down and, just outstrike you and bark at you, that's not going to work against Charles Jourdain. Like, the types of guys who are beating Charles Jourdain are like either a freak of nature slender man in Sean Woodson or somebody with like legitimate skills like Nathaniel Wood and Shane Burgos. That Arosa loss is kind of salty, but we'll move on from it. And I just think that he's got so much UFC experience. Is he a 500 UFC fighter? Yeah, but he's made his way up and is fighting guys who I just couldn't confidently say that I can think that Jean Silva could beat. And so for that reason, I am going with Charles Jourdain to win a decision. So moving on, we have Cub Swanson versus Andre Fili. Again, Cub Swanson is going to lose this fight because he is 40 years old. And this isn't the heavyweight division. This is the featherweight division. And in the featherweight division, 40-year-olds don't win fights. Is it possible that Andre Fili was too distracted by big booty Latinas all camp and is coming in here and is just going to have a terrible day in the office? Yes, you can't account for these things. That's honestly why this is so hard. You can't account for, am I going to get the fighter who I've seen? So you just have to assume you're going to get at least, 80, 90% version of that fighter, or luckily, maybe even a better one. And I think that Cub Swanson's just, these MMA fighters don't age like wine, okay? They age like milk. And I think that Andre Fili is just going to be too much. I know that this isn't like a fantastic breakdown, but it's like, again, if you're losing to Sadiq Youssef, Bryce Mitchell, Joe Anderson Brito, Nathaniel Wood, Dan Ige, bro has and Calvin Cater, bro has had, honestly, and Max Holloway back in 2014, he's had a really, really tough schedule. And I said all these names, and he's 34. That means when he fought Max Holloway, he was 24. Do I think that Touchy-Feely is going to become a top 5 or even a top 10 fighter? No. But I really could see him on his best day sort of sliding in to that, 15 to 20, and 15 being the highest, but to 20, 25, he's already 26, but like I could see him kind of sliding up a little bit, and he's probably better than some of these guys who are ranked above him. Yeah, man, I'm just like, I'm not betting on 40-year-olds. I'm making an exception with Larson Gomez because it's a women's MMA fight, and I don't, again, I've given my reasons for that one, but this is the men's featherweight division that we're talking about here, and like you don't see 40-year-olds getting wins. You just don't. So moving on, we have Joe Pyfer versus Marc-Andre Barriault. So I'm seeing a lot of people saying that, Joe Pyfer got fraud checked in his last fight. And, I understand why people would feel that way. I really do. Because I think that, like, I don't want this to sound contradictory to what I'm about to say. But, like, Jack Hermansson, whether you like it or not, is a good fighter. Okay? He's a good fighter. He's had so many losses. Like, a lot of people were really getting into MMA during COVID. So, like, if you're one of those people who was getting into MMA during COVID, then, you've seen him basically go 3-4 in the UFC. But looking at it closely, it's like, okay, Marvin Vettori was looking really good in 2020. And then it's like, okay, you lose to Sean Strickland, right? Ends up becoming a champion. And then, dude, that Chris Curtis win, like, again, it's like what I was saying before is he's not an aesthetically pleasing fighter. But it depends on what kind of fight it is. If he's going with someone who's not adept at grappling and he's able to implement it and you enjoy watching that, then, he can put on some really impressive grappling. Now, his grappling can get him in trouble because he doesn't understand when other guys are a better grappler than him. And I was there for his fight against Roman Dolidze, and I had bet on Roman Dolidze, so I was happy about it. But, like, I'm watching this and I'm like, oh no, Roman's losing. Jack is so much better on the feet. And then Jack decides to try to take it to the ground. And then Roman sets up that calf slicer and gets, ground and pound from the calf slicer position, which is insane, which was a terrible look for Jack, right? But then it's like he comes back and he looks like vintage Joker versus Joe Pyfer. He knows how to do that, move back, like, be really safe, pitter-patter, not get his defense is very underrated. But it's like, let's not act like Joe Pyfer had zero success. He was looking good. He lost the last 3 rounds, 100%, but he was looking good in the first 2 rounds. This here isn't a 5-round fight, and he's not fighting Jack Hermansson, okay? Joe Pyfer is fighting Marc-Andre Barriault, who, like, is just like, I don't know, his name's Power Bar, right? So Power Bar, like, he's got stamina for days. And it's like, okay, but, like, I don't really see how you're going to be able to weaponize that against someone like Joe Pyfer, body bags. And I think that, like, yes, is him only losing a split decision loss on paper to Chris Curtis impressive? Yeah, but I thought Chris Curtis, like, clearly won that fight. I thought that was just a loss. And, like, I think Joe Pyfer is what as advertised, okay? I just think that, like, styles make matchups. And when you're a one-dimensional fighter whose only method of victory really is landing the bombs, right? You got to be in crazy shape to do that for 5 rounds, okay? You got to be in crazy shape. If his fight versus Hermansson was a 3-round fight, he would have won. So, I think that, like, especially at middleweight, you don't see, like, it's just risky. You have to get the knockout. Otherwise, if they drag you into deep waters, and it's like, could I see Marc-Andre Barriault lasting to a decision? Yeah, but I also think that Pyfer is a better grappler than him. When you're better on the feet and at grappling, you have more power, it's just like I don't think the stamina is going to be too much of a factor from power bar. So give me Pfeiffer to win, and I think that he's going to get like a late second round knockout or submission, possibly even in the first. But he might want to kind of like, he's either going to be a bat out of hell, and maybe we get the first in that one, but it might take him until the second to feel confident. So again, we're just going with picks here, not the method. Give me Joe Pfeiffer. Moving on, we have Ian Machado Gary versus MVP. I understand like that Pereira and Prochazka is like, it's the sickest fight purely from a fight perspective, but like the Machado Gary and Page fight is the most interesting fight. You know what I'm saying? Because I mean, I don't want to like just go after the low hanging fruit here, but like we all know that the MMA community has an opinion on Ian Machado Gary, and I go back and forth on whether he is just like an egotistical 26-year-old who, I don't know, I just can't win the crowd back over, or if like he's made a conscious decision to go full heel here. It's really tricky to say, but I want to focus on this from just a fight perspective, but it has to be brought up that, this was supposed to be his coming out party on the McGregor card. Now McGregor's off, and I don't think that inherently is going to, take away anything from his confidence, right? But I think that in a lot of ways, he felt like that gave him an advantage on this card. Maybe he thought that if Conor was cheering him on, then he would maybe get like the rub from the crowd a little bit, kind of win them back, at least with who's there. Maybe not just like the MMA audience in general, but he's just kind of like on an island, I only saw clips from the press conference, but it did look like he was going after, Michael Venom Page. And, it's just sometimes when you see someone who's so outspoken and they're, just kind of doing the most, like, there's only so many times where I've seen someone do that, especially recently, and it, like, really work out for them. I guess you could say Topuria, but it's like the old man Volk shtick was kind of really a thing, and he was kind of doing like more of the talking. But anyway, from a fight perspective, right? I go back and forth on this fight. The reason why it's so tricky is because, here's what I don't fully know about Ian Machado Gary. I don't fully know what he cares more about. Winning the fight at all costs, or in the way that he thinks that he should. Because I see Michael Page, like, and I'm not just saying this because they're on the same card, right? But it's like, you can give a comp to Alex Pereira, where it's like, it's just something about his aura and his confidence and his striking baits these guys into wanting to play that game. And yeah, did we see Holland try to implement the grappling a little bit? Yeah, we did. But it's just, one, he's not the kind of guy who has the pedigree that I think is going to be able to really cause problems for someone like MVP in the grappling department. But Gary, we have seen Gary be able to work, a little bit of like clinch control. And I mean, I understand he's been working at Shooter Box, but it's like, if anything, that could help the jiu-jitsu. The only person we really saw Oliveira implement a superb wrestling game on was Tony Ferguson, and that was washed Tony. This is tricky stuff here. Very tricky stuff, because Michael Page, he was critical on himself in his debut, which I think these things can be very telling in a fighter, that he felt like he didn't even display everything he can do in there. But, I mean, Kevin Holland had nothing for him. But we do have to remember that as much as we love Kevin Holland, we've seen him crumble in the big-time fights that he really needs to try to break through. And there's something about this fight that just gives me the impression that Ian Machado Gary cares so much about winning that he's going to do whatever it takes in this fight to get into the types of exchanges, whether on the feet or in the grappling, that are going to better suit him. But as I'm saying this, like, I can just see Michael Page going at him with these blitzes. And I don't know if Ian Gary, like, I think the type of guys who Michael Page are going to have a really hard time with are really, like, your two marquee guys at welterweight. You know, Jack Della Maddalena with his ability to really work the body and land devastating shots, or a Shavkat Rakhmonov, who, I mean, we saw what he did to Wonderboy. Yeah, that horse meat, it provides a different type of base for MMA, apparently. Yeah, I keep going back and forth on this. This is tough, as the odds would suggest. I mean, they're about as close to a pick'em as you can get. But I just feel like sometimes fighters are willing to make these fights fun and be willing to risk losing because of it. The Michael Chandler strategy. And I just think that Gary is like the polar opposite of that, and that he's going to find a way to win, and it's not going to be fun, and it's going to be boring. And I hope not. I'm going to go with Ian Gary to win a decision. Moving on, we have Mayra Bueno Silva versus Macy Chiasson. You know, this is one of those picks that I'm not going to overthink. I think Macy Chiasson has a 5.5-inch reach advantage. I think that she's the much bigger fighter. I think that if she didn't get up-kicked by Irene Aldana, we could be looking at a situation where she had already fought for the title. And I just feel like the way that Mayra Bueno Silva lost that fight to Raquel Pennington, quite literally offering nothing, that is the type of fight that would just shatter her confidence. I'm going to go with Macy Chiasson to win a decision. Moving forward, we have Anthony Lionheart Smith taking on Roman Dolidze. This fight was basically the biggest musical chairs, constant switch up situation that we've seen in some time. Originally supposed to be the co-main event with Carlos Ulberg versus Jamal Hill. Jamal Hill injures his knee, and in steps... It was Khalil Roundtree versus Jamal Hill, and then Ulberg versus Jamal Hill, and then Ulberg versus Smith, and then Ulberg gets hurt. And so Roman Dolidze steps in. So this is another one, guys, that I'm not going to overthink. I know he talks a lot, and some people think that his talking is very annoying. I might be one of those people. But, you know, if you take away all the annoying stuff that he says, what you're left with is actually just like a really good fighter who has an insane amount of experience, who was helping Jamal Hill prepare for Carlos Solberg, as Anthony Smith was, talking about during the media day yesterday. And like, he's been preparing. And again, we have to look at the X's and O's here. So what is Anthony Smith good at, if anything, right? Well, his jiu-jitsu is very dangerous. But more than that, like, if he's not fighting if he's not fighting a Khalil Roundtree, or if he's not fighting Magomed Ankalaev or Johnny Walker. Listen, I know that the Johnny Walker one is kind of like, what? But you have to understand that you look at the X's and O's. If you have knockout power, you're going to beat Johnny Walker. You're going to chin anyone whose thing is I get knockouts. You're going to find his chin. Anthony Smith doesn't get knockouts. He just doesn't. But he's not incompetent on the feet. He just doesn't have enough power to throw a one shot. If anything, it's going to be like, oh, he hits you. Oh, they're wobbled. Now he gets you down and he kind of finishes you with ground and pound. What, if anything, is Anthony Smith's biggest weapon, right? Other than the jiu-jitsu. Because, I'm just saying, like, okay, from a technical perspective, what is it? The jiu-jitsu. But from like a strategic perspective, I think he does a really good job at like trying to fight in the space where, and even though he talks like very highly of himself, I think that he respects his opponents enough to understand where he could get into trouble. Like, dude, you're gonna get into trouble. So like, this should be an easy fight for him, honestly, because you're going to get in trouble with Dolidze if you get into the grappling, but he's good enough to avoid the grappling, to even like avoid getting it down there. Roman doesn't have great takedowns. He needs to get taken down. I don't think Anthony Smith is going to take him down. I think Anthony Smith is going to beat him up on the feet. I don't think Roman has anything to offer on the feet. He lost to Marvin Vettori. I don't know how he won that fight. Or wait, no, hold on. No. He did lose to Marvin. Never mind. In my head, for some reason, I thought he lost to Marvin Vettori. I don't rate him as a good striker. I think that, if you look at his wins, it's like Kyle Dawkins and Phil Hauser meaningless, and Jack Hermanson literally just threw the fight away. Because again, you have to look at like, what are their weaknesses? And Hermanson's biggest weakness is that he thinks he's the best jiu-jitsu player in the world. He wanted to do a grappling match with Khamzat Chimaev. Dumbass. So anyway, I'm going to go with Lionheart here. And we could see Lionheart get a stoppage. But like, I think that like decision's probably the most likely, even though Lionheart very rarely wins by decision. I just think sometimes you have to look at the matchup, and it's like, I think he's going to be smart, and he thinks that, okay, I'm doing the UFC a huge solid here, so they're going to want to give me another chance. And he in his head, whether it's delusional or not, thinks he's going to go on another title run. And all you got to do is believe, baby. And I just think that, how is Roman going to beat him? If you can't take him down and you can't beat him on the feet, like, the only thing is if Anthony Smith has a lapse in judgment and takes it to the ground. And he might even be okay there. He's the bigger guy. But, I still don't see how Roman Dolidze would possibly win that fight. And I've been wrong in the past, but I'm going to lean with Lionheart here. I think that Lionheart, again, will understand and see very clearly, I just have to keep this on the feet and outstrike him, and that should be a walk in the park. This probably is going to be one of those fights where in hindsight, you're like, duh, of course that was going to happen. Again, I could be wrong. Sometimes these guys just make one mistake, and that's why Dolidze is dangerous. Like, Hermanson made one mistake, and he's getting calf slicered while punched in the face in, like, the most deadly position. So I'm still going with Anthony Smith. Moving on. We have Brian, T-City, Bald Eagle, Ortega versus Diego Lopes. Man, I mean, this feels cut and dry, but is it? Not often are we presented with a fight where it's basically like an archetype of a fighter, but then the next generation of that fighter, almost like a 2.0 version of that fighter, just appearing. And I understand that that's a bit of a generalization because Ortega was one of these guys on, his run to the title initially, where he was very dependent on getting a finish to win. I mean, he almost lost to Moicano, and he has his long hiatus after Max Holloway just was doing tricks in there on him, just showing him how to block in the middle of a fight. Just like, highlight reel embarrassing type stuff. He did show heart in the last round before it was ultimately called a stoppage, which he also did during the Volk fight. And I mean, he almost finished Volk twice. So, I'm not just going to sit here and say that Diego Lopes is, like a lock here. I don't think that by any means. But, man, I mean, what Diego Lopes has done in his UFC run so far has been, literally nothing short of mind-blowing. And something has to be said about the fact that T-City is one of the bigger featherweights, and Lopes is going to mog him. When they're sitting there doing the ceremonial weigh-ins, and when they're sitting there doing the face-off before the fight, when they're, he's going to mog him. Diego Lopes is just a huge, massive featherweight, and he looks all of it when he's in there in every fight that he's had. I mean, he splashes into the UFC and just maybe arguably beat Movsar Evloev. I mean, I understand that in jiu-jitsu you can do well in your guard, and it's just not the same in MMA. Whereas in MMA, even if you're almost finishing subs, if you're just sitting there on your back and the other guy's accumulating control time, it's just, there's not a lot of refs out there that are going to say, I think that guy won the round because he had a more active guard if he just got held there, even if he's working great submission attempts. But, I mean, we see what Movsar has been doing. And then we see him go out there and flying triangle and then into an armbar Gavin Tucker, knock out Pat Sabatini, and then, dude, what he did to Sadiq Youssef, first of all, it is a crime that he didn't get one of those 300K bonuses, because, I mean, this guy is a company man at this point. He's even making features, coaching these guys on the Ultimate Fighter, and I mean, it's just I've said this in previous fights, so I don't want to sound like I'm contradicting myself. This is a big step up in competition. Let that be known. That, people were really counting Brian Ortega out. And, dude, he, hurts his leg as he's, kind of warming up. And his leg's, acting all weird. As Bruce Buffer is just announcing him, he looks like he's having a panic attack. And he has, probably the worst first round against Yair, the guy who his shoulder dislocated against in this rematch. And it's you're just thinking to yourself, this is going horrible. This could be it for T-City. And dude, he's got that dog in him. I do believe that, which is why I think that this is going to decision. But I just think that I really do believe that Diego Lopes, I know Ortega has sick jiu-jitsu, but I don't think he's going to be able to out jiu-jitsu Lopes. And I think that Lopes is way above him on the feet at this point. I really didn't like what I saw from him on the feet against Yair. like, let's be real, Yair folded in that fight. And he's like, dude, I just don't rate, like, when, I get that he was kind of rocked, but when Volk in that finishing sequence shot in, dude, it literally looked like when somebody is grappling with like a little kid, and when they go to double leg them, they just like swing their legs in the air. I think Diego Lopes is the real deal, and I think that this is his time, and I think this could look like an Arman Charles type fight, where like Ortega looks good, but he loses a decision, and that's where I'm going to go. Moving on to a legendary rematch. This is the rematch of the fight that took place in the main event that took place in Madison Square Garden back in November, when John Jones tore his pec and dropped out with his fight against Stipe. And these guys step up on the scene. And like, look, Pereira already had stardom going into that fight. I mean, the Izzy saga was enough to make people aware of who this guy is. But I mean, this was the start of the, oh my God, this is a guy who's going to end up in GOAT conversations. Because of, he's like reverse Khabibing it, you know? Like Khabib is like the I'm undefeated, but I didn't really take too many risks. He's reverse Khabibing. He's like, I've taken risks and I've triumphed and I've come up short, but like I'm risk maxing. I'm literally risk maxing over here. And let's just talk about that first fight. So round one looks a lot like Yuri Prochazka having no answers for that calf kick. And I know Joe Rogan is going to sit there and glaze the fighter who's landing calf kicks. And like DC's kind of picked up on it. And at this point, it's like John Anik is just sitting there listening to them just, oh my gosh, that leg is done. He's not going to be able, and it's like half the time that's really not the case. Because some of these guys don't know how to properly land a calf kick. And Pereira is, I'd say, the best calf kick and the best left hook that we've ever seen. He's so, like, there's no tell on the calf kick. He seems to have invented his own sort of way of throwing it, where he's not turning the leg over at all. He's so, I think that one of the most impressive things that Pereira does is he's so focused, and because he's so focused and stares at you with this crazy stoic look, that he hides everything that he does. Like, he's not like all of a sudden, like, there's no tells. He's just there, ready to throw, and he kind of keeps you guessing what he's going to do. And he's so methodical. I guess this guy just sits around and watches his old fights, and like he just lives and breathes striking. And it's like I said about MVP and how they have this comp where it's like these guys, like you'll have guys like DC and Luke Rockhold talking about, oh, and I'll out-grapple this guy, and it's like, okay, old man, okay, grandpa. But like there's plenty of guys that could do it. I mean, that Magomedov fight's going to happen eventually, and when it does, I'll be very worried about that for Pereira. But, like, that's not what Yuri's known for. And when Yuri does get a takedown, even when he managed to get on top of Glover, like, did he submit Glover? Yes. But he only did that after the two of them went through the most insane war one of the most insane wars I think that's ever taken place in the UFC, but probably the most insane war that I've witnessed. Understanding how badly each of them wanted to win. Neither of their wills were fading until the very end when Yuri was able to come out victorious. And I think that's his best play here, man. I really think is trying to make this fight, like trying to drag this fight out a little bit more. I know that he was looking good with the hands against Pereira. And I know that he did ultimately win his fight against Rakic. But, God, he was getting hit. And I just think that Rakic is one of these guys who started with the grappling and then became a very good striker. And it's like he's literally hitting Yuri with everything. And you could just tell that some people, when what they're trying to do isn't working, like they just break. Because it's a weird phenomenon, right? Because if he just kept doing it, he'd probably win a decision eventually if he can just avoid getting knocked out. But like Yuri is so hittable, and when you're cracking him with your biggest shots, I can just see Rakic sitting in there like, I can't get this guy out of here. Oh no, I chose the wrong way to approach this fight. I have overexerted myself. And Yuri is just, he's different, man. He's different. This is a really like a Goku and Vegeta type situation here. And I'm not just trying to sit here and keep making DBZ references, but it's like, you could say like Rakic is like a, I don't know, maybe like a Tien or like a Piccolo, and it's like, yeah, you're great. And it's like, you're looking good even. But like, Yuri just found a way to win because he is a warrior. There is a difference between guys who decide to prize fight and literal warriors. Yuri's talking about how he's offended that Pereira is using the help of spirits to, win. His belief is so deep in what he's doing, and like he's one of these rare guys who you feel like is just like it's like somebody from hundreds of years ago that is just somehow exists today. All that being said, I just think that he won't try to take this deep because that whole fight with Rakic, like, don't get me wrong, he's trying to finish it, but it's like he doesn't really start to work against you until you're trying to finish him and it doesn't work and you break. But I just think Pereira is too solid, man. Even if this fight ends up going a little bit later, and I don't see it, honestly, I don't see it going late at all. I think that, I think Prochazka is, dude, it's just going to be, and I hate to say this, because I'd love to see Prochazka win. A trilogy would be absolutely legendary stuff. And I'm not saying this with all the confidence in the world. I just don't see Pereira winning, losing. I don't see him losing. I think that when we were going to see him lose, it was going to be at middleweight to a striker. And if we're going to see him lose, it's going to be to a grappler. And maybe Yuri is just so focused that but I just see him having too much fun with the fight. And the difference between Pereira and all these other guys is like, Pereira's like Goku. He's him. He's him. He's got it. He has, call it the help of his spirits, his ancestors, whatever it is. His left hand is what the UFC's been trying to find somebody like this for years. Really, they have. They thought they found it with Adesanya, and let's be honest. I mean, Adesanya, just the moment he became champion, he did what a lot of these guys do, which is to just decide, I'd rather win than be exciting. And Pereira he's just different. He's just different. He's gonna be on the short list of GOAT. And I know that there's gonna be people who are gonna say, not enough time, blah, blah, blah. You have to allow those glory accomplishments to sort of mesh in. If we're just talking about mixed martial arts here. If we're just talking about martial arts here. You have to... Nobody is taking these risks and then actually winning. Like what he has done. I mean, he didn't even have that much time in UFC 300. And people can say what they want about, the Jamal Hill fight and say that, he capitalized on a weird moment. I didn't see that at all. I saw a touch of the gloves. I saw Jamal throwing a straight, and I saw him getting dropped. And I just think that Pereira is different. And I think that we're literally watching like a Goku Vegeta type matchup. I just don't see Yuri being able to get it done. I think that Alex has his number. This isn't enough time where they could have changed that much as fighters. And again, I think Yuri will do well again. But it's like Pereira is so good at almost being the most dangerous when you start having a lot of success, because there's going to be openings and he finds them, and I think that he's going to win. So I think that one way or another, especially after kind of a weird Saudi Arabia card, honestly it was sick watching Whitaker get the knockout, but after kind of a little bit of a weird Saudi Arabia card and this has that big fight feel. I know that it's not a McGregor card, but I think that we're in store for some bangers here. So as always, guys, like, subscribe, and if you have any very strong opinions about any of these fights, maybe you agree, maybe you disagree with anything, let me know in the comments. I'm going to be dropping a 5 best bets video on Saturday also, so be on the lookout for that. And enjoy, guys. I'll be checking in with y'all next week. Peace.